The deck lights were strung like a necklace against the Miami night, and the yacht moved just enough to make the champagne tremble in my glass when I watched Damon place a hand on Celine's back and steer her toward the lower cabins. He didn't look at me. Men don't look back when they're sure the room belongs to them. Celine's silver dress flashed once like a camera bulb before the stairwell swallowed them both. I could still hear the band on the upper deck, the easy laughter of clients, the little clink of ice against crystal, while the sound of my heartbeat got louder than the music. The hallway below smelled like salt and cologne, and a door clicked shut with a softness that felt like a dare. I stood there with my palm on the wall and told myself to breathe, to smile, to be the gracious wife, until I heard her voice, low and amused, asking if he was really doing this tonight. My fingers stopped shaking then. Sometimes shock is the surest way to steady a person. I didn't crash through the door. I opened it slowly, and the room looked exactly like I knew it would. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if stories of hard-won justice help you sleep a little easier, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. My name is Elaine, and if you ever saw us at a gala, you probably thought we were the picture of a certain kind of success. His hand at the small of my back, my dress chosen to photograph well under warm lights. The kind of smiling that doesn't crease the eyes. I grew up in a modest ranch house outside Orlando, the daughter of a nurse who saved every receipt and a mechanic who kept promises better than he kept cars. Work hard, tell the truth, and don't spend what you don't have. That was our family constitution. Damon came from a different world, the kind where introductions are a currency and confidence is the talent itself. He made buildings out of investors and charm. I made plans and sugar cookies for school fundraisers and told myself a marriage was more than an accounting ledger. We met at a charity 5K when I was still writing taglines for a regional cosmetics brand and wearing shoes that punished ambition. He ran with the ease of someone who believed good things arrived on schedule, waved me over at the finish line, and asked if I wanted to see a rooftop most people never get to see. That became a habit, Damon showing me views as if elevation were devotion, and somewhere between late-night tacos and his first big ribbon cutting, I said yes. When my mother died, she left me her bungalow in Coral Gables and a tidy inheritance she called permission. I could have used it to start the boutique agency I'd been sketching in notebooks. But Damon had a brighter map collateral for his first true development, one that set us up for life. He said it with us, and in those days, the word felt like shelter. If you've ever stepped back from your own life and seen the exchange rate clear as glass, you'll understand what I learned, in small pieces. After Lily was born, Damon suggested I press pause on the job just for a year or two, because he said a family needs someone at home while the other person builds the future. Future sounded noble, and Lily's hand felt warm and perfect in mine, so I scaled back to freelance, then to favors, then to quiet. I told myself this was partnership. He made the deals, I made the calendar work. The photos looked lovely: holiday cards, first days of school, small vacations where I learned exactly how to take pictures that made us look balanced. Harmony, I've learned, isn't the absence of conflict. It's the choreography of concealment. The first twinges were almost polite business trips that shaved a day off the front and added one to the back. The phone left face down on the table and picked up in the hallway a name that started showing up in Damon's stories more often than your husband's boss should. Celine Vargas knew how to move in a room, and Damon praised her judgment the way men praise their mirrors. When I asked if a boundary might be healthy, no late-night strategy sessions without a third person present, he laughed and told me I was too sensitive, that the higher you climb, the stranger the hours get. It was easier to believe my husband than my gut, so I did until the night I could not. I held our little life together with lists, pediatricians, mortgage drafts, school spirit days, a dozen passwords no one else remembered. Beneath those lists sat the deed to my mother's bungalow, stamped and filed and quietly repurposed to float Damon's first great leap. He always called it our investment, which made it sound generous, like I'd be thanked later in a speech. I used to imagine that speech, It kept me patient when I missed meetings or opportunities, or the private, breathy satisfaction of my own paycheck. The truth arrived not as a dramatic confession, but as a detail so small, it would have been nothing if not for the way it smelled, cologne I didn't recognize on a jacket. I had not ironed a message summary. I glimpsed when the phone lit the kitchen counter at 2:11 a.m., a laugh that cut short when I walked into the room. The night of the yacht, the mask fell because I watched it fall. I won't pretend I didn't hear the phones tilt up when I stepped through that cabin door. People love a story when it happens in shoes you can't run in. I won't tell you exactly what I said because there are words you either understand or you don't, and I think you do. I will tell you, I slid my ring off with a steadiness I did not know I had, and that the sound it made in a glass told me my mother would have been proud of me for how cleanly it ended. Then I walked back up those narrow stairs into air that tasted like metal and salt, and something beginning. The sound of the ring sinking into that champagne glass still echoed in my mind when I woke up the next morning in the guest room of our house. I hadn't moved to Marco's place yet, but already I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. The sunlight slipped across the floorboards like nothing had changed, but everything had. I sat up with the weight of a stone in my chest, remembering how the crowd had watched their phones held high, their whispers chasing me as I left. Damon would try to spin it. I knew he would, but I also knew there were too many witnesses, too many clips, and too much truth for him to bury. The world had seen him as I had seen him stripped of the charm that once fooled me. When I walked into the kitchen, the house felt foreign, like a stage set I no longer belonged to. His jacket was still draped over the chair, smelling faintly of the cologne I had smelled in that cabin. I brewed coffee with hands that trembled at first, then steadied once the dark stream filled the pot. I didn't cry anymore. Something sharper had taken hold. Betrayal doesn't just end a marriage, it rewires you. And as I sat down with that cup, I opened the laptop and logged into the accounts we shared. My inheritance, my mother's house used as collateral, the savings accounts Damon insisted were ours, but had always been tied to my name. One by one, I pulled them up on the screen, and the numbers stared back like proof. He thought I was just a wife, but on paper, I was still the key. I moved the balances carefully, not in anger, but in precision, transferring money into accounts I alone controlled. It felt less like theft and more like taking back what was mine brick by brick. I called the bank, reported a stolen card, and froze the joint credit line. The representative apologized for the inconvenience, and I nearly laughed at the choice of words. Inconvenience was Damon watching his platinum card fail at a valet stand in front of people whose opinions he treasured more than my trust. By the time I hung up, the shape of a plan had formed. It wasn't about running away. It was about setting the stage so when I left, I wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. That afternoon, I called a name I hadn't spoken before, Camila Torres. She came recommended by my college friend, someone who had survived her own divorce with her head high and her finances intact. Camilla's voice was crisp, steady, the kind of tone that left no room for self-doubt. Gather proof. Secure your assets. Document your child's needs. She said it like an officer giving orders, and for the first time in days, I felt like someone was on my side. She didn't waste time on pity. She handed me a list that was both terrifying and liberating. I promised her I'd follow every instruction. By the time Damon's texts started flooding my phone, "Rachel, where are you? We need to talk. Don't make this worse than it is." I was already packing. I folded Lily's pajamas, her school uniforms, the dolphin she slept with every night. I packed my own essentials, papers, jewelry, everything I would need. His things stayed where they were. I wanted him to walk back into the house and see the emptiness like a mirror. No dramatic suitcase thrown into the trunk, no slammed doors. Just quiet, deliberate absence. Sometimes silence is louder than rage. By late afternoon, I was at Marco's condo downtown. He opened the door with a jaw set tight, and before I could even speak, he pulled me into a hug that said everything. His place smelled like coffee and floor polish, so different from the ocean breeze of our house, but it felt safe. Lily skipped past us, relief shining in her small face. Watching her curl up on his couch with her tablet acting like nothing had happened hurt me deeper than Damon's betrayal. Children adapt quickly, but I didn't want her to adapt to this. She deserved better than watching her mother weep over a father's carelessness. That night, I spread papers across Marco's dining table like evidence in a courtroom. Birth certificates, deeds, bank statements. I highlighted flagged stacked. Camila's words echoed. Revenge isn't loud at the start. It's paperwork, preparation, patience. Midnight came and went, but I stayed steady, pages rustling beneath my hands. It wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity, the kind that only comes when denial has burned away. The next morning, Damon called. Not text, not voicemail. His voice came tight and rehearsed. Rachel, we need to fix this before it gets out of hand. His tone was the same one he used on clients when smoothing over mistakes. I let him talk until he paused, waiting for my agreement. It's already out of hand, I said evenly. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You think this can be solved with one conversation? He sighed. Called me unreasonable, said Celine. Meant nothing. I let the silence hang long enough for him to squirm before I answered. Good, I told him. Because she's all you'll have left when I'm done. I hung up. The click of that call was more final than any slap could have been. 2 days later, the first crack showed. Damon had tried to take a client to one of those rooftop restaurants where every view is a transaction. The server was an old friend of Marco's, and word reached me before Damon even texted. His card declined, then another, then another. The client excused himself with a polite smile, but the story made its rounds by the next morning. In Miami, humiliation is currency, and Damon was broke before he knew it. My phone lit up with his rage. What did you do? Why are our accounts frozen? Do you know how this looks? I didn't respond. Silence was its own kind of punishment. Meanwhile, whispers followed Celine into her own office halls. Friends texted me stories, her storming out of a meeting after someone muttered homewrecker, her smile faltering under the weight of stares. For a woman who thrived on power and polish, whispers were poison. Damon had handed her the cup, and she had to drink from it every day. At Marco's condo, I tried to keep things normal for Lily. School runs, packed lunches, bedtime stories. But even she felt the shift. One afternoon, she asked, "Is Daddy mad at you?" I kept my voice steady. "Daddy made mistakes, but I'm making sure we're okay." She studied me with eyes too wise for 9 years and said softly, "Good, because I don't like when you cry." Her words stung deeper than Damon's lies ever could. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the little girl who trusted me to keep her safe, to show her that betrayal wasn't the price of love. By the end of that week, Damon found Marco's condo. He pounded on the door like he owned the building, but Marco stood his ground, broad shoulders filling the frame. "You're not welcome here," he told him. Damon sneered. "Called it between me and my wife." I stepped into view, arms crossed. "Ex-wife in progress." His eyes flickered with rage and desperation. "You can't just take our kid and empty our accounts." "You look insane." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Insane? You paraded your affair on a yacht full of people, and you're worried about appearances." A couple walking their dog slowed nearby, recognizing him, and I saw the flicker of embarrassment in his face. "Rachel, please," he muttered, lowering his voice. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Celine doesn't mean anything." I leaned forward, steady as steel. Then let her keep you company while your cards decline, your friends vanish, and your reputation burns. Because from where I stand, she's all you've got left." Marco shut the door before he could answer, and inside, I felt my heart steady instead of race. For the first time in years, Damon wasn't in control. That night, Marco lifted his glass in a quiet toast. "I've waited a long time to see you like this," he said. Not doubting, not crying, just done with him. I raised my water and answered, "I'm not just done. I'm dismantling him." And I meant every word. But the city was already moving faster than either of us realized. By the weekend, a clip surfaced online me, storming into the cabin, the slap the ring dropping into champagne. It spread like wildfire, captioned, "When the wife catches you at your own party." Comments poured in, cheering me on, mocking Damon, mocking Celine. His carefully built image had been dragged into the open where no amount of charm could fix it. The internet had given me an audience I never asked for, but one I suddenly understood. Damon once told me perception was everything. Now, he was about to learn how quickly perception turns into judgment. By the time the video from the yacht made its way across every corner of the internet, I had already begun to feel the exhaustion beneath the adrenaline. It was surreal watching strangers weigh in on my life, their comments ranging from admiration to ridicule while I folded laundry at Marco's condo and tried to keep Lily's world steady. The laughter of people online didn't erase the quiet ache that settled in at night when the apartment grew silent and I could hear my own thoughts too clearly. I didn't want to cry, but some nights the tears came anyway, hot and stubborn, refusing to stay hidden. One evening, I sat at the edge of Lily's bed, watching her breathe, her small hand curled around the dolphin she refused to sleep without. The soft hum of Marco's television drifted down the hallway, but all I heard was her whisper, "Mom, you don't cry as much anymore." Her words were half asleep, but they pierced through me. I smoothed her hair back and kissed her forehead, promising her quietly that I was stronger now, even if I didn't always believe it myself. She needed me steady, not broken. Marco noticed the nights I stayed at the table long after midnight papers spread out the lamp, casting shadows over bank statements and receipts. He never pressed, just set a glass of water beside me and patted my shoulder before heading to bed. But his presence reminded me I wasn't alone, and sometimes that was enough to keep me moving. My mother's photo, tucked into one of the folders, became my silent witness. Her smile reminded me of what I stood to lose if I didn't fight hard enough. Her house, her legacy, it had all been folded into Damon's empire, and I wasn't about to let him gamble it away. Still beneath the fire, there were hours when doubt crept in. What if the courts didn't see the truth clearly? What if Damon's charm swayed the wrong people? I had seen him talk his way out of impossible corners before leaving me doubting my own instincts. Camilla warned me about this when we met again, her sharp eyes steady on mine. "He'll try to make you question yourself, Elaine. That's what men like him do. Don't let him pull you back into that cycle." I nodded, but I carried her words like armor, repeating them in my head whenever Damon's name lit up my phone. The silence I gave him must have driven him mad. He called, he texted, and when he finally left a voicemail, his tone was softer, almost pleading. He wanted to talk, to explain, to remind me of our years together. I deleted the message before he could finish. Those years weren't erased, but they weren't enough to save him from the choices he had made. For every dinner party smile, there had been a quiet moment of dismissal. A gaslight I accepted as normal, a sacrifice I convinced myself was love. And now, in the stillness of Marco's condo, I couldn't stop replaying those moments with new clarity. The weight of humiliation pressed hardest when I ran into acquaintances in public. At Lily's school drop-off, I caught the sideways glances, the two bright smiles from mothers who clearly had seen the videos. Their sympathy was sharp, but their gossip was sharper. One woman approached me in the parking lot, her voice hushed, as though we shared a secret. "You're brave," she whispered. Most women would have just stayed quiet. I thanked her, but inside, I felt the sting. Brave wasn't what I felt. I felt bruised, stripped, and exposed. But if people wanted to call me brave, maybe I could grow into the word. At night, when Lily was asleep and Marco's apartment had gone still, I allowed myself to replay the betrayal in my mind. The way Damon's hand had rested on Celine's back, his shirt half undone her smirk that dared me to crumble. It wasn't just the act of cheating, it was the ease of it, the arrogance. That memory carved deep, but it also hardened me. Betrayal is cruel, but it can be clarifying. Each time the image returned, it reminded me why there was no going back. Not for him, not for us, not even for the child we both loved. I carried the hurt like a stone in my chest, but over time, it grew lighter as I shifted its weight into something else. It wasn't enough to walk away. I had to protect Lily's future, my mother's gift, and the dignity I nearly lost. Damon's empire was built on borrowed trust, and much of it had been mine. That truth cut through my doubt on the days when grief tried to drag me under. If I didn't fight, he would walk away with everything, and I would be left teaching my daughter that silence is survival. I couldn't let that be the lesson she learned. Marco caught me staring out his balcony one evening, my arms wrapped around myself against the night breeze. "You're thinking too much," he said gently, setting a blanket around my shoulders. I gave a small laugh. "It's all I can do lately." He stood beside me, his silence steady, his presence grounding. Sometimes support doesn't come as advice or promises. Sometimes it comes as someone standing beside you while you relearn how to breathe. The ache remained even with plans unfolding and papers signed. Pain doesn't vanish just because you've chosen to act. It lingers, tugging at the edges of every decision, whispering that you could have prevented it somehow. But I knew better now. Damon's choices weren't mine to carry, and his fall wouldn't be mine to mourn. Still, there were nights when I pressed my palm to my chest and wondered how long it would take for the ache to fade into something softer. Time doesn't heal overnight, but every sunrise at Marco's condo every morning, Lily hugged me before school, brought me one step closer. And yet deep down, I knew the time for quiet pain was ending. The nights of silent tears had served their purpose, but they couldn't last forever. I was stronger now, steadier, and the fire that had started in that cabin was only growing. I had held my grief, let it wash over me. And now it was time to rise. The next chapter wasn't about hidden pain. It was about awakening to the truth I could no longer ignore. The days after the yacht scandal settled into a strange rhythm, half routine and half anticipation. I took Lily to school, packed lunches, and checked her homework while she sat across from me at Marco's dining table. But under those normal gestures was the sharp knowledge that nothing about our lives was normal anymore. Each morning, I woke up steadier, and each night, I felt the shift growing stronger inside me. Grief had made its mark, but now clarity was what I carried. Camilla called one afternoon as I was sorting Lily's clothes into neat piles. Her voice was brisk, unshaken. "It's time to think ahead, Elaine. The public fallout is working in your favor, but you need documented leverage." She explained what she needed: copies of deeds, bank transfers, receipts, and especially any proof that Damon had used company funds for his affair. The conversation wasn't emotional. It was practical, methodical, like she was sketching a battle plan. I wrote down every step, my hand steady, my resolve anchored. That evening, I sat at Marco's balcony table with folders spread open, the city lights glinting off the pages. I stared at the deed to my mother's bungalow, the same home Damon convinced me to tie to his first investment. My chest tightened as I traced her signature with my finger. For years, I had told myself it was sacrifice, but now it felt like theft. He had taken my mother's gift and gambled it into his empire. I wasn't going to let that piece of her vanish into his mistakes. Damon's calls grew more insistent. Some were furious, others desperate. He tried every angle, anger, guilt, charm. One night, he left a message that made me pause. "Elaine, let's sit down, just us. Don't drag everyone else into this." I almost laughed at his choice of words. He had dragged everyone in when he kissed Celine under my nose with cameras watching. Now he wanted privacy, as if truth could be managed like a business meeting. Camila suggested meeting him, but on my terms, in a public space where witnesses would be plentiful. I chose a restaurant on Lincoln Road where half of Miami seemed to gather on weekends. I arrived late on purpose, heels tapping against the tiled floor, every head turning as I passed. Damon was already seated, his phone in his hand, his posture too stiff to disguise the unraveling. He stood when he saw me attempting the old charm with a compliment about how I looked. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a smile. The server poured me water, and I let the pause linger until it was almost unbearable. Damon leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this, for Lily's sake." The mention of our daughter sent heat rushing to my face. "Don't you dare use her as cover," I said quietly, but loud enough for the next table to hear. A woman nearby stirred her iced tea slowly, her eyes fixed on us, though she pretended otherwise. "Good. Let them listen." Damon tried again, claiming Celine was a distraction, that stress had driven him to stupid choices. I slid my phone from my bag, opened the folder Camila helped me compile, and laid evidence on the table, one document at a time. Bank records, hotel receipts, corporate charges that had nothing to do with business. With each paper, Damon's face drained of color. His hand trembled as he tried to gather them up. "Keep your voice down," he whispered harshly. "No," I said, standing so the whole room could hear. "I stayed quiet for years while you built an empire on my sacrifices. Now everyone deserves to see exactly who you are." Gasps rippled through the restaurant, phones tilted upward. Damon sat frozen as I delivered the line I had been saving. "You don't have a wife anymore, Damon. You have an audience." The words landed heavier than I expected. A man 2 tables over clapped once, and others followed. My pulse raced, but not from fear. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. I picked up my bag, leaving him surrounded by papers and stares, his reputation crumbling in real time. The air outside hit me cool and clean, as though I had stepped into a new life. My phone buzzed before I reached Marco's car. Videos of the confrontation were already online, captions multiplying, hashtags turning Damon's name into a punchline. By the time I laid my head on the pillow that night, strangers across the country were watching my marriage collapse with popcorn in their hands. The following days unfolded like a storm I no longer had to direct. Clips of Damon's stunned expression were stitched into commentary, edited into parody songs, shared with captions that crowned me a symbol. It wasn't just about my pain anymore. It had become something larger, something public. Damon tried to fight back with a live video from his office, pleading for privacy, insisting we were working through personal issues. But the comments scrolling across the screen mocked him openly. "Privacy." "On a yacht," one wrote. Another asked where Celine had gone. His attempt at control only poured fuel on the fire. Camilla's words echoed when I called her to update her on the chaos. "This is good, Elaine. Public opinion may not win cases, but it influences everything. Let him chase sympathy. You hold the receipts, and that's what matters." She was right. For the first time since the betrayal, I wasn't reacting. I was steering. At night, I lay awake, listening to Lily's soft breaths in the room down the hall, and I knew I wasn't just fighting for my dignity. I was fighting for the future she would grow into. If I faltered, she would grow up learning betrayal could be excused, that silence was survival. I couldn't allow that. The moment I realized I no longer needed to cry came quietly. I stood at the sink rinsing dishes, the news humming on the television about Damon's company facing serious reputational damage. I dried my hands, looked out at the Miami skyline, and felt calm instead of sorrow. My pain had settled into something clearer, something stronger. It wasn't just about leaving Damon anymore. It was about dismantling him piece by piece until nothing remained of the man who thought he was untouchable. The morning after my confrontation with Damon at the restaurant, I woke with a strange calm. The storm had shifted. He was no longer the man who controlled the story, and I was no longer the woman who stayed silent. My hands still shook a little when I poured coffee, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the sense of beginning something deliberate. For years, I had been reacting, but now, every step felt like a move I chose. Camilla called early. He'll try to regain control. Elaine, she said, her tone steady and almost reassuring. Don't answer every call. Don't explain. Silence will do the work for you. Meanwhile, we press ahead with the filings. I wrote down her instructions, then folded the paper in half and slipped it into my planner. Paperwork had become my weapon, as sharp as any confrontation. By midweek, word spread of Damon's humiliation at that rooftop restaurant. One of Marco's friends who worked as a server there described how Damon's face turned red as his cards kept getting declined, client after client watching. It was exactly the kind of embarrassment he once thought happened only to other people. I didn't have to lift a finger. The city was already carrying the story further than I ever could. Miami had always thrived on reputation, and Damon's was collapsing in real time. I decided not to reply to his angry texts that night, though I read every word. His frustration leapt off the screen, accusations that I was ruining him, pleas for me to think of Lily, and finally empty promises that he could fix things if I just stopped. I left the phone face down and tucked Lily into bed, her warm little hand reaching for mine. You look better now, Mom, she whispered sleepily. You don't look so sad anymore. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, my heart heavy but determined. The next day, I walked into Camilla's office with a folder full of evidence. She spread each page across her desk with practiced precision receipts, emails, joint account statements. She looked at me over her glasses, a faint smile forming. You've done your homework, she said. This is how women like you win. Not by shouting, but by being undeniable. Hearing that steadied me more than I expected. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing for war on my own terms. Meanwhile, Celine's name began slipping through conversations I wasn't part of. A friend from Lily's school texted me. I heard someone called her a homewrecker in the middle of a meeting. She stormed out. I pictured her walking down a glossy hallway, every eye on her, the polished smile cracking at the edges. For a woman who thrived on being untouchable, whispers were worse than open attacks. Damon had given her my place in his life, and now she carried the weight of it like a curse. By Friday evening, Marco found me sitting on the couch, with the news on low volume. You've been quiet today, he said, dropping onto the chair across from me. I nodded, eyes still on the screen, where a segment hinted at Damon's company facing reputational risk. I'm not quiet, I answered softly. I'm watching. He raised his glass in a quiet toast. Then, keep watching. It's finally his turn to squirm. Saturday morning brought the clearest proof yet that Damon's downfall had begun. I was making pancakes when Marco's phone buzzed with a message from a friend in the business district. He read it once, then passed it across the table. It described Damon's attempt to host investors the night before, only to be met with polite excuses and cancellations. One of them even joked about not wanting to catch the fallout. The words hit me like sunlight through storm clouds. Damon's empire had always relied on others believing in him. Without that belief, he had nothing. Later that afternoon, my phone lit with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Damon's voice was low, almost broken. "Elaine, can we please talk like adults? This doesn't need to go further." I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "It's already gone further. You chose that when you betrayed me in front of everyone we know." There was silence on the other end, heavy and strained before I hung up. That silence felt better than any apology ever could. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat with Marco on the balcony. The city hummed around us, neon reflecting in the distance. "I don't feel weak anymore," I admitted quietly. "It's like every piece of me that he tried to take, I'm finally taking back." Marco nodded, his voice low. "I knew you had it in you. You just needed to see it yourself." The internet was still alive with clips of my confrontation at the restaurant. Hashtags spun out strangers stitched my words into their own videos, and one post called me a queen collecting receipts. I hadn't asked for any of it, but I understood the momentum it created. Damon's face, once used to draw admiration, was now a symbol of arrogance undone, and with each passing day, I felt less like his shadow and more like my own foundation. By the time Monday rolled around, Camilla had drafted the first wave of filings. "We move now," she told me firmly. "His reputation is in free fall, which means his defense will be weaker. You need to be ready for what comes next." I folded the documents carefully into my bag, my hand steady. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was strategy. The filings were barely dry when Damon tried one last desperate move. He scheduled a live broadcast from his office, sitting in that glass-walled space where he used to parade investors through like trophies. His tone was rehearsed, softened at the edges, almost pleading. "Don't believe everything you see online," he said into the camera, his eyes fixed just below the lens. "My wife and I are working through personal matters. We ask for privacy during this difficult time." I watched the stream on Marco's laptop, Lily coloring at the table beside me, unaware of the spectacle playing out in real time. The comments scrolled faster than he could keep pace lines of mockery-clipped jokes and pointed reminders that his betrayal had been caught on tape. "Privacy, on a yacht," one wrote. Another asked, "Where's Celine? Did she ghost you too?" Within minutes, parody accounts had clipped his speech into songs and spoofs. He thought he was regaining control, but every word only fed the fire. Camilla called as soon as the broadcast ended. "If he's trying to play the sympathy card now, is the moment to move. Do you still have the emails?" I opened the folder on my phone. Screenshots, text chains, even a corporate receipt for a Valentine's dinner billed as business development. They weren't just careless, they were damning. By morning, those files had found their way into the right inboxes. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to know. The next day, the Miami Herald ran a piece that made my heart race even as I sipped coffee at Marco's counter. Local developer under scrutiny for misuse of corporate funds, amid affair allegations. CNBC picked it up by evening. Damon's name splashed across a national ticker. Investors pulled back in waves, projects stalled, and phone calls went unanswered. His reputation, once polished enough to open any door in the city, was now a liability no one wanted to touch. Celine didn't escape either. Screenshots of her walking into hotels beside Damon surfaced from anonymous accounts matched against her public claims of being self-made. Her company had no choice but to launch an internal investigation. She locked her social media, but the screenshots were already everywhere, every smiling post flooded with comments that cut deep. The woman who once smirked at me in that cabin now carried a reputation as radioactive as his. Damon's voice cracked when he called me late one night, long after Lily had fallen asleep. "You've ruined me." he said, his words strained, almost breaking. Are you happy now? I sat on Marco's balcony, the city lights reflecting in my glass of water, and answered evenly. Not yet. He begged me to stop to think of his career, of the empire we had built. I'm losing everything, he whispered. I stayed calm. No, Damon, you lost it yourself. Actions have consequences. You just finally ran out of ways to hide them. Then I hung up. At school pickup the next morning, one of the other mothers walked up to me in the parking lot. She lowered her voice, but her eyes were kind. I just want to say you're an inspiration. Most women would have stayed quiet. Her words stayed with me as I buckled Lily into the car. I hadn't set out to inspire anyone, but perhaps that was what strength looked like, refusing to bury betrayal under silence. By the end of that week, Damon had become untouchable. Colleagues stopped answering his calls, clients canceled meetings, and even friends distanced themselves to avoid guilt by association. Reputation was everything in Miami, and now his was a cautionary tale. The man who once told me I was too emotional to understand business was discovering what real ruin looked like. Camilla pushed harder now. This is when we file motions, Elaine. Reputation can crumble, but legal decisions make it permanent. She slid documents across her desk as I signed them one after another, my hand steady. Custody, property, financial disclosures. It was all being set into motion. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked softly, "Mom, is Daddy mad at you?" I brushed her curls back, searching for the right words. "Daddy made mistakes," I told her gently. "But I'm making sure we're safe." She looked at me with eyes too wise for her age, then whispered, "Good. Because I don't like when you cry." My throat tightened, but I smiled for her sake. Her peace of mind had become my North Star. The internet kept circling Damon like sharks around blood. Strangers wore shirts printed with the line I delivered at the restaurant. "You don't have a wife anymore. You have an audience." Parody accounts flourished his downfall, consumed like entertainment. He had built an empire out of perception, and now perception was devouring him whole. But I knew public humiliation wasn't the end. If I wanted closure, I needed permanence papers, signed orders, enforced consequences that couldn't be undone with charm or time. The courts were waiting, and Camilla was ready. I walked out of her office with a folder under my arm, the weight of it steady in my hands. The storm outside had already taken Damon's image, his partnerships, and his pride. The storm inside me was about to take everything else. The first time I saw Damon in court, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who used to stride into parties with his hand at the small of my back now shuffled into the courtroom like someone 10 years older. His suit looked wrinkled, his tie crooked, and the confidence that once carried him had drained from his face. For a brief second, I felt the sting of memory, but then Camilla leaned close and whispered, "Remember why we're here." Her words steadied me. The judge called the session to order, and the room fell into the heavy quiet of official proceedings. Damon tried to smile at me across the aisle, a small gesture that once might have pulled me back into his orbit. I didn't return it. Instead, I folded my hands on the table, the papers in front of me lined in neat stacks, each one evidence of how he had built his empire on my sacrifices. Camilla started by laying out the inheritance my mother left me, the bungalow in Coral Gables, the money Damon had persuaded me to use as collateral. She slid the deeds forward, the judge's brow tightening as each document was read into record. Then came the bank statements showing joint accounts drained for trips labeled business development that were nothing more than vacations with Celine. Finally, the corporate charges, dinners, and hotel rooms billed to his company in bold detail. Every page left Damon's lawyer floundering, his objections weak against the hard ink of proof. Damon shifted uncomfortably as the receipts piled higher. His lawyer tried to argue they were legitimate expenses, claiming dinners on Valentine's Day could be considered client relations. Camilla cut him off with precision. If that's the case, Your Honor, perhaps the IRS should be notified. A ripple of laughter passed through the courtroom, and Damon's face flushed red. He looked smaller with every word, while Camilla's voice grew sharper, each fact cutting through the illusion he had maintained for years. When the subject turned to custody, my chest tightened. Damon's lawyer tried to paint him as a devoted father, but the judge had already reviewed Lily's school reports and the stability I had created since moving to Marco's condo. Camilla's closing words carried the weight of every sleepless night I had endured. A father who exposes his daughter to public scandal, financial instability, and dishonesty is not a stable guardian. My client provides the consistency and safety a child requires. The judge nodded his decision clear. Full custody was awarded to me with Damon limited to structured visitation. Relief swept over me not as triumph but as assurance that Lily's world would remain steady. The financial rulings followed swiftly. Camilla demanded spousal support, citing the years I had stepped back from my career at Damon's urging. The irony wasn't lost on me. His empire was crumbling, yet he would now have to pay me for the sacrifices he once demanded. Damon slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising. "This is extortion. She's taking everything from me." The judge silenced him with a firm look. "No, Mr. Hale. This is accountability." Outside the courtroom, the fallout reached his family. Damon's father, a retired surgeon with a reputation for dignity, called me privately. His voice was heavy, carrying the weight of disappointment. "Elaine, I can't believe what he's done. You have my full support. Sophia is welcome in our home anytime. But Damon, he's cut off." I thanked him, though a part of me mourned for him too. No parent wants to admit their child has become a disgrace. Damon's younger brother Anthony was more blunt. He texted me later. "Don't ask me to bail him out. He made his bed. I'm done cleaning up his messes." Even his blood was abandoning him. Financially, his collapse was swift, with investors fleeing his company filed for bankruptcy protection within weeks. Clients pulled out, banks called in loans, and the employees who once admired him suddenly had no paychecks. Articles online called it one of the fastest downfalls in Miami real estate. His Maserati was repossessed, his penthouse slipped into foreclosure, and he moved into a modest rental apartment that bore no resemblance to the life he had flaunted. Emails trickled in, each one more pitiful than the last. "Elaine, please, I didn't mean for it to get this far." Celine pressured me. It wasn't love. It was survival. "We can fix it," I never replied. Words couldn't mend what he had shattered. He had destroyed himself, and nothing I could have said would have softened the truth. The news around Celine spread just as quickly. Her firm concluded its internal investigation, and the announcement of her resignation hit the business pages with barely a paragraph of sympathy. She tried launching a consulting service, but the internet followed her. Every post drew comments branding her as a homewrecker, her name now a scarlet letter in the industry. The polished executive who once walked into rooms with effortless command now carried a shadow that no new title could erase. One evening, after another long day of meetings with Camilla, I sat on Marco's balcony again. The city lights glittered, but instead of dread, I felt something close to freedom. "You did it," Marco said, raising his glass. I shook my head gently. "Not yet. He still has to face himself." The final hearing was scheduled, and I knew it would be the last blow, the one that forced Damon to see the ruin with his own eyes. The day came quietly, with the courtroom less crowded, but no less heavy. Damon stood before the judge, his voice cracking as he pleaded for leniency, claiming he had nothing left. "I'm broke," he said, his tone ragged. "I can't pay her anything." Camilla didn't flinch. "Your Honor, my client deserves stability after years of sacrifice. If Mr. Hale has nothing, it is because of his own reckless behavior." The law is clear. The judge agreed, ordering support payments locked in despite his protests. Damon slumped into his chair, his face pale, the realization settling in that he had truly lost. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I had felt in years. Damon once told me, in moments meant to wound, that I would be nothing without him. But now, the world could see the truth. He was the one who had nothing without me, and that was the justice I had waited for. Yet even as I stepped into the sunlight, I knew there was one more chapter left to face. Damon's empire had crumbled. His reputation was gone, but the man himself was still out there, broken, desperate, and clinging to the past. It happened on a Sunday, a bright afternoon that seemed too ordinary to hold anything important. I was leaving a cafe with Lily and Marco when I saw Damon waiting on the sidewalk. He looked nothing like the man who once commanded rooms. His shirt wrinkled, his shoulders slouched, his face hollowed by months of sleepless nights. When his eyes found mine, he shoved his hands in his pockets as if trying to make himself smaller. I sent Lily home with Marco, kissed her forehead, and promised I'd follow soon. Then I turned back to Damon, meeting the gaze of a man stripped of everything he once used to define himself. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I've lost it all, Elaine. The company, the house, even Celine. My own family won't answer my calls. I don't know what's left." I crossed my arms, keeping my voice calm. "I know what it feels like to lose everything, Damon. You taught me that. The difference is, I rebuilt. You destroyed." He flinched at the words but didn't argue. Instead, he pulled a folded photo from his pocket, Lily, at 3 years old. Her smile sticky with ice cream. He held it up like proof of something still worth saving. "This is what we had. Please don't shut the door forever." For a heartbeat, I felt the ache of memory. But then I remembered every night of doubt, every moment I had silenced myself for his comfort, every tear I wiped away so Lily wouldn't see. "You already shut the door," I said softly. "You slammed it when you chose betrayal." His eyes glistened, but I didn't bend. "I'm not here to reopen it. I'm here to make sure it stays closed." He whispered promises of change of therapy and regular work, but I only shook my head. "It's not about fixing cracks in a wall, Damon. It's the foundation, and you built it wrong." His shoulders sagged, the fight leaving him. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "You're the architect of your own destruction." The words landed heavy between us, and I knew he finally understood. I turned and walked away without looking back. In Marco's car, Lily waved at me from the back seat. I slid in beside her, exhaling a breath that felt like release. When I glanced out the window, Damon was still standing there, clutching that photo as though it could anchor him. But I knew better. No picture, no memory, no plea could undo what he had built for himself. A year later, my life looked nothing like the one I had left behind. I bought a townhouse in Surfside, nothing extravagant, but every corner carried my choice, my fingerprints, my freedom. I started a boutique marketing agency with Marco's encouragement, the career I had once shelved for Damon's ambitions. Clients came quickly, drawn by both my experience and the quiet strength of my name. What he once used to reduce me to just a wife had become my own foundation. Lily thrived too. Her laughter rang brighter, her confidence grew, her world steadier, without the shadow of secrets. Watching her ride her bike down the street, I saw a little girl who believed her home was safe, her mother strong. That more than any settlement or victory was the justice I had fought for. As for Damon, whispers still reached me. Bartending downtown couch surfing with old acquaintances, a man people now pitied more than feared. Celine vanished entirely, her name a cautionary tale in corporate circles. They became reminders of a story that no longer belonged to me. Sometimes people ask if I miss him. The truth is, I miss the man I thought I married, the one who never really existed. That version of Damon had disappeared long before the yacht party. The real man was revealed when the mask slipped, and once I saw him clearly, there was no turning back. Looking back now, I realize betrayal didn't break me. It freed me. Sometimes, destruction is necessary, not as punishment, but as transformation. I had to watch my old life crumble to understand what I was capable of building on my own. On the anniversary of that night, Marco brought over champagne. To freedom, he toasted. I lifted my glass and added, to transformation. As the bubbles rose, I thought about the path that had brought me here, not just surviving, but reshaping. Not defined by what was taken, but by what I chose to keep. When I tuck Lily into bed now, she smiles at me and says, "You don't cry anymore." And she's right. Tears were for the woman who believed loyalty meant silence. I am no longer her. I am the aftermath, stronger, calmer, brighter than the storm that tried to undo me. Before we close, I'd love to know what part of this journey stayed with you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like to hear more true family stories, stay connected here.